George Russell's victory at the 2026 Australian GP should have been a definitive statement of Mercedes' resurgence, but the narrative has instead shifted toward what was happening beneath their engine cover. This first race under the 50/50 hybrid power unit regulations immediately ignited a political firestorm regarding a compression ratio loophole. Mercedes stands accused of exploiting the thermal expansion of engine components to bypass the 16:1 ratio limit while on track, a technical maneuver that provided a significant top speed advantage on the Albert Park straights. Even Lewis Hamilton, now in Ferrari red, has openly expressed his disappointment, suggesting the FIA should not have allowed such a gap in the regulations to exist. This controversy has created a unique dynamic, a victory that is formally recognised but morally contested by the entire paddock. The FIA's decision not to apply retroactive penalties has sparked a long overdue debate on the consistency of technical enforcement in this new era. What exactly did Mercedes do to their power unit that rendered this victory immune to a steward's disqualification, and what specific criteria would actually cause a trophy to be stripped after the podium celebrations? Watch our full breakdown to understand the mechanics of this dispute, and make sure to subscribe to the channel to support our deep dive investigations into the 2026 F1 regulatory landscape. To understand why this 1-2 finish for Mercedes feels so fractious, we have to look at how the race actually unfolded on the streets of Melbourne. The 2026 regulations have fundamentally altered the driving experience, stripping away downforce and replacing the traditional DRS with a manual boost mode that puts 350 kilowatts of hybrid power directly into the driver's hands. From the lights out, it was clear that the competitive order had been shuffled. George Russell, starting from pole, found himself in an immediate dogfight with Charles Leclerc, who launched his Ferrari brilliantly from fourth to take the lead into turn 1. Russell later described the opening laps as a hell of a fight, noting that the battery management was so tight he saw his levels hit zero on the grid. Leclerc was buoyant in the early stages, trading positions with Russell in a display of wheel-to-wheel racing that the FIA had promised these new regulations would deliver. However, the race was ultimately decided not by wheel-to-wheel combat, but by a catastrophic strategic paralysis at Ferrari, when the first virtual safety car was deployed on lap 12 for the engine failure of Red Bull's Isaac Hadjar, and again on lap 18 for Valtteri Bottas. The top teams were faced with a binary choice. Mercedes reacted perfectly, pitting both Russell and Kimi Antonelli for fresh rubber. Ferrari, in a move that baffled the paddock, chose to stay out with both Leclerc and Hamilton. The result was a textbook example of a strategic blunder. As the race resumed, the Ferrari SF26S began to eat through their tyres in the warm Melbourne conditions. Russell and Antonelli, on fresher tyres and with what appeared to be superior energy management software, simply drove away. By the time Ferrari realised the error and brought their drivers in, the gap had ballooned to over 15 seconds. While Leclerc remained diplomatically calm, stating that Ferrari delivered at the start but needed to improve strategy, Lewis Hamilton was far more pointed. Over the radio and in post-race interviews, Hamilton's frustration was palpable, famously remarking, "We're not doing that again," regarding the gamble that cost them a shot at the win. Yet the 15-second gap Mercedes enjoyed at the flag wasn't just down to Ferrari's tactical collapse. There was a lingering sense in the paddock that Mercedes had a hardware advantage that shouldn't have been there. This brings us to the heart of the cheating allegations. The 2026 engine regulations were designed to be more sustainable, featuring a strict 16:1 compression ratio limit to keep power levels in check. However, the technical delegates found themselves outmaneuvered by the engineers at Brixworth. The controversy centres on a specific loophole in how the FIA measures this ratio. Currently, the measurement is only taken when the engine is at ambient or cold temperature. Mercedes identified that by using specific materials and clever engineering, they could ensure that once the engine reached its operating temperature on track, thermal expansion would naturally increase the effective compression ratio to approximately 18:1. This provides an estimated boost of 30 to 40 horsepower, translating to roughly 0.3 of a second per lap. Rival teams like Ferrari, Audi and Honda were incensed, arguing that this violated the spirit of the regulations. Toto Wolff, in his typical combative style, dismissed these claims as utter bullshit, asserting that Mercedes had simply done a better job of interpreting the rules. The FIA, perhaps wary of causing a total collapse of the new era's credibility in its first weekend, brokered a compromise. They admitted the loophole existed, but clarified that Mercedes had not technically broken the rules as written. Consequently, they announced that from June 2026, after the first 7 races, the measurement would also be taken at a hot condition of 130 degrees Celsius to close the gap. This creates the controversial situation we saw in Australia. Mercedes won using a system that the FIA has effectively admitted is against the intended spirit of the law, yet because they complied with the cold test, the victory stands. In the world of Formula One, this is known as a grey area success, much like the double diffuser in 2009 or Mercedes' own DAS system in 2020. So why wasn't Russell disqualified? In Formula One, a disqualification or the stripping of a win usually requires a technical infringement, a clear, measurable breach of a rule that was in effect at the time of the event. We've seen this before. Sebastian Vettel lost a podium in Hungary 2021 because his car couldn't provide a 1-litre fuel sample, and both Hamilton and Leclerc were disqualified from the 2023 US Grand Prix because their undercar planks had worn down by a fraction of a millimetre too much. These are black and white violations. In the case of the compression ratio, Mercedes complied with the measurement protocol that was legally active on March 8, 2026. Since the FIA cannot retroactively apply the hot test that doesn't become mandatory until June, the stewards had no legal grounds to overturn the result. As far as the record books are concerned, Russell's victory is as legitimate as any other, even if the paddock whispers suggest otherwise. The frustration among the drivers isn't just about the engine, though. It's about the very nature of these 2026 cars. Max Verstappen, who put in a heroic drive from 20th to 6th, was scathing in his assessment. "I'm not enjoying it at all," he told reporters, describing the cars as the worst to drive due to their tricky handling and the constant need for energy management. Lando Norris echoed this, noting that F1 has moved from the best handling cars in history to ones that feel empty and emotionally draining to race. This creates a fascinating paradox for the sport. While the drivers suffer through what they describe as an anti-racing experience of lifting and coasting to recharge batteries, the fans in the grandstands saw more wheel-to-wheel action in Albert Park than they have in years. The reduced downforce and cleaner air behind the cars meant that following was easier, and the manual boost mode allowed for tactical overtakes in corners where passing was previously thought impossible. Mercedes has clearly mastered this new, chaotic landscape better than anyone else for now. They have the best integration of chassis and power unit, the most refined energy management software, and a team execution that didn't flinch under the pressure of the VSC periods. While Ferrari licks its wounds and debates its internal strategy calls, Mercedes leaves Australia with a maximum points haul and a clear lead in both championships. However, the clock is ticking for the Silver Arrows. Once the June deadline hits and the FIA begins measuring engine compression at operating temperatures, that 30 to 40 horsepower advantage may vanish. The question then becomes whether Mercedes can maintain their edge through pure aerodynamic development and software optimization, or if Australia will be remembered as a victory won in a legal grey area that their rivals simply couldn't reach in time. Ultimately, Formula One has always been as much a battle of lawyers and rulebook interpretations as it is a battle of drivers on track. Mercedes played the game better than anyone else in Melbourne, but the bitterness in the paddock suggests that this fight is only just beginning. Was Mercedes' exploitation of the cold test a brilliant piece of engineering that deserves to be celebrated, or has the FIA allowed a legal form of cheating to undermine the start of this new era? Tell us what you think in the comments below. Does this loophole tarnish Russell's win, or is this just classic F1?